What do you think of this view, huh? It's pretty nice.
Spoilers. Not like full spoilers. Like we're spoiling it all.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Spoiled. I am Joe Juba. I am joined by Alex Stadnik,
Hello, friends.
Andrew Reiner,
That's me.
and Andy McNamara.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everyone.
And we are talking about The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, buddy.
Alex is happy about that.
We all have, I know. I've been dying to talk about this game past. You jump on things, and there are clickers.
Yeah, well, Andy wrote our review, which you can read on the site right now. And I think, Andy, you had some problems talking about this game, talking around some spoilers. It's a tough game to review, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there that are pretty upset about how tough the embargo was for this particular review. And it was tough. And it's tough because the things we're going to cover here are where the game gets interesting. It's where the game like really starts to challenge you as a player. So in the review, when I wrote it, I even sent Joe a thing. I'm like, I'm not even going to talk about game mechanics. Talking about game mechanics in this game is just dumb. Like being like, oh, I can pick things up and stab people. Like I can get that across pretty easily. I wanted to try to focus on, that you needed to play this game, that it is extremely challenging, I think, as far as like as you play through it. But I kind of actually, this is going to be weird. I'm going to be a dissenting voice. I actually kind of agreed with the embargo because I felt like it was to preserve the player's experience.
Yeah.
And I was the first to finish it amongst us. And I was just like, finish. I want to talk. And I want that, and I want the community to do that. And I hope anyone who's maybe sitting down to watch this show, if you have not played the Last of Us Part 2 on your own, go away. This is spoiled. There are spoilers. We're going to talk about things that you do not want to know. You don't want to know.
We're going to talk about everything that everyone has had to dance around in talking about this game so far.
Yes, so, definitely.
But I totally agree with you, Andy, on that front of the embargo restrictions on this were stricter than usual, I think. But even if I did not have those, like if I were reviewing this game, I think just for the sake of preserving the experience for the people reading it, like there are a lot of things in there that I wouldn't want to talk about even if I could.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just so simple in that, like, since we're in the spoiled range, you know what I mean? It's almost like when you reviewed Metal Gear Solid 2, or when you had to talk about Metal Gear Solid 2, because that's the kind of level of things that happens here. And you're like, I gotta tell everybody, but you're like, but I can't tell everybody because that's the reveal, right? Like you can't start off your BioShock review with giving that insight, right?
Right.
Can I?
So the trick there, though, I think what's different about The Last of Us and what makes this more challenging is like a lot of times when we sit down for a spoiled, our discussion is contained to, hey, let's talk about the last hour or two of the game.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about the major spoilers in The Last of Us Part 2, you're talking about one that's about 2 hours in and one that's about a half an hour in. And then every other spoiler is sort of on a more minor tier, right?
For sure. Can I say one thing before we dive into what those are?
Go for it.
I think I'm talking to you, the person who has seen spoilers, not you. Well, maybe you. The person who's seen spoilers and decided already that this game is not for them, but they want to know what happens. Stop watching this video. There is so much more to this game than what has come out. I beat it. I checked the spoilers after. It spoils stuff. That's why it's called spoilers, but like it only scratches the surface of what this game actually does. So like I'm begging you, go play it, then come back. We'll be here. We'll be here for
But hold on. But if you're just determined to not play it, please continue watching the video. We appreciate you.
Fair. That's fair.
One thing I'll add on top of that, there were the spoilers that leaked, a couple months or a month before the game came out.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's like, oh, now I know everything. This game is so much bigger than any little moment. The way it makes you feel, the journey it takes you on is unlike any other game I've played. Like it messed with me for a while, like long stretches of me, like 3 to 4 hour stretches of me wondering like what's going on with other characters as I'm playing as someone else. And you don't get that usually in games. And it really like messes you up. And then your perspective and your feelings for characters start changing as you go along. It's brilliant. So don't
Yeah.
worry about like the little spoilers you saw beforehand. The game is way bigger than that.
Yeah, one of those things I talked about in the review is the fact that there's like empty spaces. And I actually felt that the empty spaces were some of the more powerful spaces because you would like murder a bunch of people and then it'd be like, think about that. You need to think about that. You need to think about what you're doing. You need to think about this world and you need to think about your life, right? And like you'd walk through and like the world would feel oppressive and the decision you've made. And like you said, Reiner, the people that you'd come across, you're like, what are they up to now? Oh my God, what could be going wrong? You know, like there's so much to think about that you need to play the game to experience that kind of like the action of doing some of the things that it makes you do and then dealing with the consequences of it in your own head.
Yeah, when I've been thinking about that myself, so much of what makes this game special, I think, is the participatory element of it. Not just the fact like, yeah, it's a video game, it's interactive, but the way that by immersing you in the world the way it does, by connecting you to the characters the way it does, and by making you do the things that the characters have to do, there's some way that you feel almost like in some ways, I don't know, like responsible for what's happening. Yeah, in a way that a lot of games have trouble with. And that isn't to say like, I don't think the message boils down to something as simple as violence is bad and you need to think about that. As much as it is, because like I think we all know that, right? We don't need a game to like teach us that lesson.
Yeah.
But I think it prompts an examination of that and your own attitude towards that because of your proximity to it in this game. So
yeah, violence is the tool. I feel empathy is the message.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good point.
It is perspective, right? That everything, and that's when we start talking about this. Like you go into this game after finishing, the first game, where you're like, in my opinion, I was one of the people I was like, I didn't like the ending of the first game that much. And actually, now with part 2 in place, I think the ending of the first game is brilliant. I've changed my tune because this game changed my perspective on it.
Yeah.
Well, you got it wrong originally. It was brilliant.
Yeah, that is true.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough.
But you're on the right side.
I demanded more.
There you go. Yeah.
And I got
more.
it in Last of Us Part 2, right?
Yeah.
Which is that Joel makes the choice that they need to kill Ellie to come up with a cure for the cordyceps virus parasite.
Yep.
And he goes, no, I love her too much. She's too important to me. Kills the doctor. Kills everybody in St. Mary's, the Fireflies, and takes her out. And then lies to her about it. And that sets up everything in 2, and it starts it all down an extremely dark path.
Right. So this is the point where there's enough preamble now. We're going to start spoiling stuff.
Yeah, let's spoil stuff. Let's do it.
Yeah. So curious, did any of you, Alex, I think maybe some of you learned about the spoilers beforehand a little bit, or was it just you, Alex?
Just Alex.
I think it was just me.
I didn't know him.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was
I put a document in front of his face. I said, read this. Is this important?
Classic.
And he started
Reiner
crying,
prank.
and I was like, oh, I'm not going to read it.
You actually came up to me and said, hey, is this your PTO chart? Does that look right? And then I was like, Joel, what? So that was actually, I went into, when I got the review copy, I knew Joel dies. I'd seen that a lovely person put that in our Rainbow Six Siege video. Thank you for that. But, yeah. So
people are just the worst.
Yeah. But here's why, especially I harp on what I have in the last couple of podcasts in the start of this. I thought that was going to be the end of this game. I thought the revenge story was about Deena. I thought that's what we're going for, which Sony did very well in their marketing. And so I had that cloud over my head of like, I'm just going to be looking for this at every turn, and I know where this is going. And then for them to kill Joel in the first, what did we say, an hour, first 2 hours, whatever that turned out to be. Yeah. I was like, oh shit. I'll edit that out. Oh shit. Like, here we go. Like, I don't know anything now. Like, it is a totally blank slate. And we can go into it deeper, but as much as I love Joel's character, don't love Joel, Joel's character, and I think he's very interesting. This game doesn't work on the level that it does without killing Joel, because Deena, as we learn about Deena's, she's great. She's an awesome character who I never would want to lose, but I don't have that emotional connection with her from a couple E3 showings and 2 hours of gameplay. You know what I mean? Like this, something this in depth needs that strong of a character to be that motivating factor, and I don't think it works without killing Joel off.
Yeah,
Well, that's
you already loved Joel from the first game, right? The connection they had, that kind of father-daughter bond. But then they just hammer it home with this just really touching sequence of Joel giving Ellie a guitar, right? And you're just like, it's a slow moment, like nothing's going on, but you're so vested in it because it's so beautifully done. And then, you know, the way they handle this sequence where he's just getting beaten down, you know, like brutally just beaten down. And you're like, there's no way they're killing him here. We're 2 hours into the game. It's like, okay, here comes Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, for me, when they do that first perspective change, when you play Abby the first time, when they're doing the kind of a little bit of the training, you're like, all right, I'm playing Abby. Okay, I get it. And then she talks to Owen. He's like, I'm going to show you something. And you're like, well, what am I going to see? And they're like, I think he's here. And I'm like, Joel. That's Joel. They think Joel's here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think Joe said to me later, he thought it was Tommy. But I went immediately to Joel. I was like, Joel's there. They're here to get Joel. They're here to get Joel. And then they kind of come up, and then like they cross paths, and Joel and Tommy start to help her. And I'm like, it's not Joel. They're not here to get Joel. They're here to get somebody else. Like they were setting me up, and I'm like, okay, it can't be Joel. And then they go to the house and they walk in, and you're like, it's not Joel. And then they close that door, and you go, damn it, it's Joel. And like, you know it the second they close that door. And you're like, this is gonna go bad.
See, they get you again, right? Because it's like they close the door and they start beating them up, and you're like, oh, this is bad. But then you play as Ellie and you go racing down those stairs. You know what's behind that door. You go in there and you're like, this is it. Now the tides have turned. Joel's not saving me. I'm saving Joel. And then no, things go south so fast.
Yeah. And Andy's right.
It wrecks you.
I did think they were after Tommy at first, but I had this terrible tendency to do the like, they know that I know that they know they're going to do. So I kind of like talk myself out of stuff.
Yeah.
Even to the point that when Joel had been shot in the leg, was bloody and beaten on the ground, and I mean, basically just like lying there helpless, but still alive. Right up until that final moment where she's like raising the golf club, I'm still thinking like, they're not going to do this. There's no way that this is what they're doing. And it took me all the way until you see Ellie kneeling at the gravestone.
Yeah.
That I was like, they did it.
Because
up until that point, you keep waiting for like, you know, narrative escape routes where they can be like, he's still breathing. And nope.
Or, you know, the Super Mario 2 ending where she wakes up in a bed like, oh, it's just a dream.
Yeah.
Right.
Or because the other part of me is like, okay, they know that I know this is a revenge story. So they're going to make me think the revenge is about Joel. But no, I mean, it's still got to be about Deena.
Yeah.
And at this point, you go, I hate Abby.
Yep.
I hate that Owen guy. I don't know who these other people are, but every single one of these people need to die. I am going to kill every single one of them. It makes you extremely angry and extremely vengeful. And it is perfect. I mean, that's the play. That's what this is the beginning of the play that Naughty Dog makes.
Yeah.
That is the first one of like, hey, am I screwing with your emotions? Well, guess what? This is just the beginning, Buster. Because like it's the start, right? That's where you finally begun the journey is at that moment. It's just so funny that's the spoiler everyone talks about. I'm like, that's when the game starts.
Yeah, that you could put the title card right after that, because that's when the real journey begins.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about that.
Yeah.
This huge moment in this universe, right? Like this fictional universe is one of the main characters gone. Like Alex said, you'd think that would be the ending, and then you roll the credits and just have your audience be upset. But no, you do it right out of the gates, and you make them angry, right? And you don't want to put the beauty of it though is you don't want to put the controller down, like Joe said, because you don't really believe it right away. You're kind of lost.
Yeah.
Swimming for answers.
I did put the controller down for a little bit. It gave me a very similar vibe. I won't give, because it's a different thing. I won't give spoilers for it, but there's a part in the Walking Dead show where Negan kills an important character. And when I saw that on the show, I actually like stopped watching it. But when it happened in the moment, I just had to like walk away from the TV for a while and like take a break. And that's what I had to do with The Last of Us 2. It's like when that happened, I just had to like put the controller down for a bit and come back to it.
Yeah, that's what the.
But I think.
Sorry.
I think you guys are totally right that they are part of the beauty of that moment is that it so expertly like puts you right like in the same frame of mind, right on the same page with Ellie in that moment. Like Andy was saying, like they just need to die. But I think what's interesting about that is by putting you and Ellie in the same place early on, it really calls attention to the way that like you as a player and Ellie's outlooks or willingness to continue might be diverging as the story goes on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And it's funny when the first time you play as Abby, that's where they really kind of introduce combat and a threat for the first time in the game. And I was just like, oh, this character's nobody. She's just going to die horribly here.
Yeah.
I was like, she'll be gone in a minute. And then we'll be back to Ellie and Joel.
Yeah, I thought she was just like, oh, that's cute that they let us play another character for a tutorial.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I was like, oh, that's a neat way to do a tutorial. That was definitely my first reaction. That is not the correct reaction.
No, that's interesting, especially because Abby was the first person they showed they showed the PSX thing, but then like they had the trailer 2 was all about Abby, so that's interesting. Yeah.
So I want to take a little detour here and talk for a second about the stuff that they've shown, because I think prior to the game coming out, they did some really clever things with like the promotional videos stuff that they did that was almost like, I don't know if spoilery is quite the right word, but I mean like they did a great job of showing you stuff that was actually significant but removed from context. You really didn't know how to interpret it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, like, definitely. At points you go like, that's not in this game. They're not going to show that. And you're like, oh, this is in this game. And they showed that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Specifically that dance. You guys remember that E3? It must have been 2 years ago, where Sony had that presentation that was just totally set in that dance hall, and they showed that.
I was in there. Yeah, I was in there.
So, yeah, you got shuffled from place to place. So that like, I remember that trailer because it was like very stunning. It was a memorable trailer, but going through the game, they only reference the events of that dance. That dance happens the night before you start playing as Ellie, right?
Yeah.
And I thought it was so clever that they just decided to not put that in the game at all. Assume that you had seen that E3 presentation, and if you hadn't, it's not like it's story critical stuff. It just, adds a bit more context. And then they actually showed it way at the end of the game.
Oh yeah. Do we talk about how long the game is real quick? I mean, way long is way long.
How long did it take you guys to finish?
I
was right around 30 hours, I think.
Yeah,
I was 27.
I was about 26, 28 around there. Yeah. How many times do you guys think that game ended, by the way? They loved the cut to black so many times. I was like, oh, that's it. And then it just kept going, cut to black, kept going. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I think for the spoiler talk, the time is significant because a lot of the time is not spent the way you would think. Like a lot of the time, right? Like they really make you try to see different perspectives.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's the next game we talk about where the place cards could be, is that the next one is go through the next 3 days of Seattle, which is the game you thought Last of Us Part 2 would be, which is that you're Ellie, you're on a revenge quest, you go do cool things, like you go to that open area where you get the map and you get to choose different things you get to do as far as gameplay stuff go. The gameplay's right on, you're having fun, you're like, this is the Last of Us game I'm supposed to do, and you feel like
clearly taking some lessons from Lost Legacy there, I thought, which was interesting too, that open Seattle area. Sorry to interrupt. But I
no
like
problem.
that.
And you're like all on things, and then you're like, I'm playing the game I thought I was going to be playing, and then they'd be like, hey, why don't we have a flashback with Joel? and you're like, okay, what are we doing now? And that's when it starts. You start to see a bit of what I like to call the Matrix that's coming. That you learn later, much later, but they start to introduce more things about giving you more perspective on Ellie and Joel. Which her birthday was one of my favorite moments.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That museum.
Oh my God. Yeah.
If you like dinosaurs, it's just the best moment ever.
Yeah, that's what Reiner took from it, was dinosaur.
Well, did you notice that they did the most Naughty Dog thing ever, by the way, which happens multiple times in this game, which in the game, if they go, oh, looks clear, I think we're fine. You're like, they're going to go through the hole and you're going to get punched in the face, right? Every time they say that. And the same thing, too, in that scene, what I loved in that museum flashback was that she goes, it's your birthday. I got you something. She goes, what'd you get me? Dinosaurs. And you're like, yeah, no one's getting you dinosaurs. You're not getting dinosaurs.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like you as the player are like, that's dumb, Ellie. And then you come around that corner and you're like, it's dinosaurs.
Yeah. But I mean, you come around that clearing and you interact with this dinosaur sculpture outside, and it's beautiful, right? It kind of shows the world in decay, but there's this monument from the past that's there, and you spend time climbing it, and it's a cool moment, right? You think that sequence is going to end there, right? Like that's it. That's the end of the birthday. But no, you go into that museum and you have basically what is like a full day, you know, not a full day, but what you would if you took a family to a museum, what you would do. You go sightseeing in this museum, and they spend a long time doing that, more than they probably should. But I loved it, right?
So
I just thought it was so touching and so interesting the way they were interacting with each other. And you just forget about all the darkness in the world in this moment. You just want to go on to the next room, see what's next.
Yeah.
And also, to your earliest point, Reiner, that's step 2 in developing that relationship some more. When you get the guitar from him, you're like, we have a relationship. And then they go, I got you this for your birthday. And you have a relationship. You really start to feel the love between those two. And it makes you regret, obviously, what happened at the lodge where he gets, Andrew Ryan. So like it's another one of those, they expertly play you again, because that scene is so touching, to your point. Like it's you really like, you get how those two got along.
Yeah. When we get to the end of the year and have to do top 10 moments,
they could all be from The Last of Us.
It's going to be really
seriously.
I've 6 on my list that all could fill it, like, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, like, and that was my attitude too as I was playing, except I think the first time, and I'm sure we'll argue about this later in the year, but the first time that I was like, oh, that is absolutely on our list of top 10 moments, is the space takeoff in the museum when they're in the little capsule.
Yeah. Like the dinosaur moment's brilliant on its own, right? And you're like, oh, that's great. And then you go to the space one and you're like, now we're going on more of a journey here. And then they top it. They knock it out of the park again with that getting into that capsule, and just the moment they share together, the look on her face, the joy she has, you feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such
a
great
that whole
moment.
Scene happens like right after you learn how to swim, right? Like that's that whole scene.
That's how they teach you.
Yeah. So like
going under the log. Yeah.
And like you totally even forget like the moment you get there, because the museum is so awe-inspiring. You're like, oh, that's right, I can swim in this game now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which is funny though, because even as like seasoned players like us, you still, when that scene starts and Joel's like, here, jump in, we're gonna go swimming, that part in your brain is just like, okay, I get it, the game is just trying to teach me how to swim now, I understand.
Not the point.
And even so the scenes after it just like wipe that gaminess away from it, and it just like still blends together.
Yeah. I think that whole sequence is one of the most beautiful, especially on the backdrop of the darkness that surrounds this world. I think it's one of the most beautiful scenes in video games that I've played. The amount of like happiness, but also crushing sadness knowing what's around that corner, which they illustrate using the boar after, is so beautifully done. And I think it tops the giraffe scene. Like that moment of like, oh, this is what this world was, and this is what we aspire to. And I think it knocked that type of sentiment out of the park. Like I absolutely loved it. Still gives me chills thinking about it.
This is probably a good point too to bring up, that like at this point in the game, you've had a number of things where you're like cruising around and you've spent time on like horses with Deena and time with Joel. That at this point, I think to point out the acting in this game, the job that Ashley Johnson did, Troy Baker, Laura Bailey, which you'll learn more about later, and Shannon Woodward were amazing, right? Like, and a lot of the banter and the writing. I know people are mad that there's not as much agency as far as like your own player choice in this game, that you are definitely led on a path, but the way that path is delivered is so well done. And these characters are so well acted. It's the performances are fantastic. And that's what makes some of these scenes, like the one we're talking about here, really sing and moving around in the world.
Yeah. Not every game is The Outer Worlds or The Witcher or whatever. It's not always about having that kind of agency. I mean, like, and those games are great. And there's like, they deliver one kind of excellent experience, but there's room for
okay. So question for you. I'm always okay with that. I'm okay with both ways, right? But I definitely, there were times in this game where I was like, I wish you would give me player agency because I don't want to kill this person as Ellie.
Yeah.
Like this game, so many times to me go, Ellie, no.
Yeah.
No. Like the choices they make, I had to scream at my TV.
Yeah.
And
that's why you don't do choice. That's why
you don't do choice, because you would choose something else. Like, and that's how it makes you have that reaction. And there were times too, by the way, I was like, can I let myself die here? Is there because they're not giving me choice? If I just let myself die here and let the other person win, is that a win condition? And by the way, I
did that.
Yeah.
You can't. I tried it multiple times. You have to do what the game wants you to do.
Yeah.
Which I think.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say the next major spoiler we kind of like go into like a little bit of leeway, or like segue, is that that's where you come up to like Nora, and like the Nora scene that like, when you talk about choice, that where you have no choice in the matter.
Yeah. And I want to come back. I want to circle back to this whole scene at the hospital, which is what they showed during the state of play stuff when like Ellie's infiltrating the hospital. I want to come back and talk about that when we get to talking about Abby a little more too, because there are just like so many connective touches there. Because I replayed this section a couple times because for that preview that went online. So there are so many interesting little touches to get into there. But I am so glad that they did not give you that kind of choice that you're talking about, because but the other thing I'm glad they didn't do is make it a like button press mini game. For instance, when she's like when there's that girl playing the PlayStation Vita as you're infiltrating the hospital and you end up like Ellie ends up having to kill her. I think that moment lands, and moments like it in the game land so much better because they do just completely remove your control and make you watch, rather than cheapening it with like press square at the right moment to stab her in the jugular with your pocket knife,
Yeah.
But to that point, I think it is important that they, in the Nora scene specifically, that they make you initiate it. They'd say you have to press square to start this. We'll take care of the rest, but like this is your choice that they make the player do. And I also think before we get super deep into the rest of it, I think it's important to note too that at this point Ellie knows Deena is pregnant. So it's like she has that protection mode going on top of revenge, and she's like just totally like even more so honed in on I am going to murder all these, not just for revenge for Joel, but to get Deena safe and out of here. And they push that in a way that gets very, very bleak very quickly.
So and yet again, another one of the circles that comes back later. By the way, I like that there are two sides to the pregnant story as well.
Yeah. Did any of you guys assume that Ellie did not torture Nora?
Oh, she did.
Yeah. So that's, I guess what I'm saying is like, in that moment when Nora is like, I'm not talking, and you, like Alex said, you as a player have to like initiate the beatdown. I just thought that Ellie killed her then.
Oh no,
But
I'd
then-
see. Once again, that was the same trick they did on me before. That's the thing is, I fell for their trick so many times because there's an earlier scene. There's an earlier scene where they're talking and they were like, "Yeah, Tommy used to have to. He told me about this time he had to like torture some people, right?
Yeah.
And like it changed him. You know what I mean? And you were like, I don't care what Tommy did back then. You know what I mean? Like you're like whatever. And they're like, no, man. Like he's done some things. Joel's done some things. You don't want to know what those guys have done. And you're like, me. Well, I would never do that. I'm Ellie. I don't do those kind of things because that's what this game makes you say. And then all of a sudden you're in the hospital, and like you said, I got a pregnant lady back at the theater. I've got revenge on my mind. I got to get to this stuff. I need to know the answers. I need to get what I need to get out of there. And you make that call, and you do it, right? And you don't have a choice. And that's when I looked away. I had to do the like, God damn it. And like it just, I couldn't watch, but I knew what was happening. And then she admits it.
Yeah. See, in the moment, I just thought that she was like, well, Nora's not going to talk, so I'm just going to have to kill her. But then in the following scene, Ellie's talking to Deena, and Deena asks her something like, did you find out what happened? And Ellie's basically like, yep, Nora, I got Nora to talk. And I'm like, oh, why is she lying? And then she actually told Deena the information, and I was like, oh no, she did it. Oh.
Yeah. One of the interesting things is how often you return to certain environments, right? Like that theater. You continually go back to that, and then another one is the aquarium, right? That comes up a little later. Yeah. But I thought that was brilliant how they handled that, like making those kind of these safe havens to a degree, and then
you mean like when you go in the
turn
theater
those
and you
upside
go
down
like,
again?
Yeah.
You're like, that's so weird that this just window's open. If I was looking for these guys, I'd just come through this window, blah blah blah, walk away.
Yeah.
And once again, you do not listen. This game, by the way, does a great job of like, I'm going to tell you, and you are not going to listen until I show you. Until it gets ugly, and then you're going to know.
So this gets to the point. I was probably in that hospital sequence, or maybe a little after, where I think I was probably at 12 hours or so into the game, working under the assumption that it was like a 15 to 20 hour game, probably. So that's when I sent Andy a message that was like, hey, can you tell me if I'm like halfway or more yet? And his response to me was, I don't think you want me to tell you how long the game is.
By the way, we got to point out that Andy got through like 30 hours of Last of Us somehow in like a day. It was like, it was like the next day. It's like, I'm 24 hours in. And it was like, how is that even possible without breaking space time?
I played a lot over over a 3-day period. I mean, I played a lot. I was staying up late.
I was like 3 hours behind Andy on Friday, and by Monday morning, he had finished, and I had made like 8 hours of progress. But what I want to get to, I guess, is like, we're talking about the theater and the open window, and that gets us sort of to the character switch moment where you think you're coming up to what is the culmination of
that's ending number one right there. When we talked earlier about ending, that's ending number one. When Ellie walks in to that room and the gun is pulled, you're like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
That's the end of the game. Yep.
Did any of you have any inkling or doubt that was not, you were not entering the conclusion of the game?
I thought that was like, I had 40 minutes left. Maybe.
This was the culmination of all her effort, was the showdown with Abby. And what we're about to talk about shouldn't work. Like, there's narratively, like, no, seriously, like, narratively speaking, when you get to the apex, or what you perceive as the apex of a story, to cut away for 10 hours, like, are you kidding me? That should never work. But it really does.
They make you do.
Yeah. Like, for real. But the story that they tell after that is so compelling and so well done that it does, and makes those after moments even more sweeter. Like, there's so many moments in this game we've already touched on too, but like, that shouldn't have worked. That narratively speaking, there are structure to these things that are objective pillars that Naughty Dog breaks and does it for a good purpose, and it's incredible.
And it's such a bold move too, to take an audience who's been hungering for this vengeance,
Yeah.
to put them in a moment that is the final confrontation, and then back burner that for 10 to 15 hours.
Yeah.
To go to fade to black and then show Seattle day 1, and you're like, Seattle day 1?
Yeah.
I'm on Seattle day 3. Oh, this must be just a little bit of perspective, like how she got here. Wait. And I think Joe did the same thing I did, which I was like, okay, I'm going to play here a little bit. Then I opened it up and I was like, my talent tree. There's a lot in my talent tree. Why is there so much stuff in my talent tree? What is going on? Like, what is going on? And I kept playing and I was like, this can't be day 1. This cannot be a whole new play perspective. And
I immediately, playing as Abby, I immediately murdered her like 3 times. I was like, oh, that's too bad, Abby.
Yeah, sorry.
What's funny is, so like, Reiner said to me the exact thing that I said to Andy when I figured out that you're playing as Abby, which is like, look, I know what Naughty Dog's trying to do, and they know that I hate Abby, but they are not going to make me like this character. I like, in those first 10 minutes of playing as her, I'm like, sorry, Naughty Dog, it's a lost cause. You're not going to connect me to this character. And Reiner, I never actually touched base with you about that afterwards. Did your opinion on that shift at all?
Yeah. So I don't know how far forward we want to go here, because it's the next apex moment, like where things hit again in that theater.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts were completely different then at that point. Yeah. Like, I'm conflicted, and they have you controlling Abby at that point, right? Like, and you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do. That's how they turn things. Like, from me hating this character so much that I'm throwing her off cliffs and having clickers bite her, to being like, we'll set it up later, but to having empathy, as Andy said, for this character that I looked at as like a Darth Vader like element. Like, she's like the evilest person in the world, and I need to get revenge, and that they upended that on me.
They started right away with, like, she goes and talks to, like, Manny, and you're like, oh, that Manny guy, I remember him.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't like Manny. Now
cool.
you're like, that's an interesting quip from Abby. I still hate you, but that was kind of funny. That was a nice thing she said to that old guy.
Yeah.
But wait, no, I'm not supposed to do that. I hate you. And like, they start to unravel that, and things like, you think Owen is the worst person in the world, right?
That did not change.
You think he's still the worst person in the world?
Oh, I think he's a dirtbag.
And so, by the way, this is also the mirror. This is where the mirror begins, I think, as we start, and we need to start talking about this. I think this is like the biggest thing, which is that Owen, his wife is pregnant, right? So we have another pregnant lady on the other side of the whole thing, right? Like, so, and it introduces that whole thing. We have Abby, who is on her own fighting things, and then she goes to the aquarium, which kind of ends up being the museum for Abby, or I'm sorry, for Ellie, right? Yep. So, like, you start to get this, like, the mirror just keeps showing more and more of the same.
Also, back up a step, Abby's on a quest for revenge, just like Ellie.
Correct. And along her way, she finds Lev and Yara, right? And picks them up. And this is the point where the game, just like, where my mind goes, this is where we fall off the deep end. Number one, which we should talk about the stadium. The stadium's an amazing moment. That's maybe something we should talk about. But, like, you realize that Abby is turning into Joel.
Yep. 100%.
And that Lev is Ellie. And you are like, mother.
Well, the other interesting angle there, though, is that she doesn't know. Like, she only knows Joel as this like brutal smuggler who broke into their hospital and killed everyone. She doesn't know him and the connection he has with Ellie like we do, and she doesn't know that she is forging a very simple, that she's essentially becoming a shadow of the person she hated the most.
Yeah. almost beat for
And
beat.
by the way, their blind rage towards each other is why they kill each other and how everyone becomes a monster, right? It's because you don't know their stories. And that's when they start to tell the Abby story, that when you start to find out who she is and why, like when they go back to the scene with her dad, right? Like at this point you start to go, okay, I get why she wanted to golf club the shit out of Joel, right?
Yeah.
Like I understand. Like I don't agree with it because I like Joel.
Yeah.
But her dad's a nice guy. Like they're trying to make the world. They go through the scene where they explain why, how hard that decision is to make the decision as the Fireflies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To make you go, it's not as simple as like, I gotta save Ellie, kick in the door and kill everybody and run out. That scene had so much more behind it before it happened in the game you played already, right?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's like that. My mind just kept going like blown, mind blown, mind blown.
Well, and if you want to, talking about mirrors too, we get into a little like mirrors within mirrors, because in terms of just the whole thematic thrust of The Last of Us Part 2, when I interviewed Neil Druckmann, which you can read on the site, he brought something up interesting, that was the fact that they sort of saw the plot or the themes of The Last of Us Part 2 as a mirror to the first game, where the first game is about this paternal connection that these two characters have and what you would do for love to protect. And on the other, like in that reflection is The Last of Us Part 2, which is what you will do for vengeance. But the motivation in both cases is love.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They get you. They keep getting you. I tell you, it happens so many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. The relationship that Abby has with Yara and Lev is so perfectly done. Like as a player, like Abby's doing everything you would to help these people. Like they carefully planted those seeds of you just being like, yes, we need to shepherd these kids along. We need to bring them to safety. And then you realize like, oh my God, like, as you said, Andy, like I'm exactly Joel.
Yeah.
This is Ellie. And at that point you're just like, I don't even know what to think anymore.
Yeah.
Like I want to bring these kids to the end. I don't want to go back to Ellie now.
Yeah.
Like I want to stay here. I don't want to conclude Ellie's story because this is very important. These kids need to be taken to safety, and they just turn you inside out at that point. Emotionally, you just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like in the same scene, like a simple one is like Nora. Like when they go to Nora and she goes like, Ellie tells Nora like, tell me where they are. And she goes, why would I tell you? She's my friend. And then later you have the scene where they're like, they're friends, right? And they're like catching up. And you're like, man, I tortured Ellie, just murdered your friend Abby. You know what I mean? Like absolutely annihilated. And it's once again, that was perspective on Nora, that like Nora's just barely in the game, but they did find a way to interlace it in such a clever way that you spend enough time with her as Abby that you're like, yeah, Nora was all right too. Like that all these people are just trying to live in this world that's an apocalypse, right? They're just all trying to live their own, like the stadium is Jackson.
Yeah.
Right. The stadium is like their own habitat that they built on their mirrored version of the world. And Jackson was yours.
Yeah.
It's just, and that scene, by the way, I just want to point out, I cannot believe they made all those like graphical touches and all that art and all those scenes and all the animations. And like, you're like, there's a farm in here. There's like, this is like a crazy, weird
people everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah. And you just walk through it and here's some stories and you walk away. And that's like so insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not on the game development side of things, but I cannot imagine how expensive it is in terms of money and, time that people have to spend to make in as many unique environments, whether that's the stadium, whether that's just a little like makeup shop that you walk through, or a restaurant that players maybe or maybe don't even find.
Yeah.
Like just the game in general has so much of that detail. And then you just burn it. You just burn through it and go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But
and the thing is too, the relationship with like how Yara shows sacrifice, right, in the whole thing, and the way that they turn Abby into a caretaker with her, and then particularly then she becomes the steward of the you know what I mean, like the passing of that particular baton, and then the story when they need to go to the island, go to the belly of the beast essentially to find resolution, right? You think to that part of the story. And once again, it's one of those like, well, I think I'll go to the island and maybe things will finish up there. And then you have the showdown with Isaac, who is the head of that faction. And then all of a sudden, all the people that Abby loved again, who are from her city, she turns on at that point.
Yeah.
For love and protection, as she continues that downward spiral into becoming Joel even more. That she will sacrifice anything. She will kill anyone, just like he killed her father.
Yep.
To get out, to save your ward.
Thing.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
I also have to bring up.
She will kill any dog. Any dog.
Oh God. Yeah.
I also want to bring up the symbolism of the zebra.
Mm.
You know how there was the giraffe in the first game, and it was just like they're free, they're walking about. It's a beautiful moment, kind of a reflection of Joel and Ellie.
Yeah.
Well, the zebra, being beaten up and caged up, and then unleashed, is a reflection of Abby. I thought was, again, just genius. Just a little visual moment, and another touching moment with her family and the people around her. Right. That if you really think about it, after you finish the game, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
They thought about every little thing in this game.
Naughty Dog has such a beautiful fascination with comparing their characters with animals. There's always there's that thread, like you talked about with the zebra. Joel has owls on his mug. Like, we've done the giraffe thing. It's I want to examine it more. I don't have anything intelligent to say about it, but there's that strong connection that they share with those animals, which is interesting to me.
And I also think too, at this point in the game is when you start to realize that you as Ellie are out of control, right? Because I think when you first go in and you kill Owen and you kill Mel and you kill that dog, Alice, right? Like when those things happen the first time, you're like, he deserved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that dog's not stopping me from what I need to do. Get out of my way. I'm getting in this door. I'm going to see what's going to happen. And then you kill a pregnant lady and you're like, that's unfortunate, but it had to happen, right? Like you literally,
well, you didn't know. Yeah.
You didn't know. You almost convince yourself it's okay. And then in that mirror, you go like, what was I thinking 10 hours, by the way, 10 hours ago in game? Like, that's how far you've gone, that you were like, that thing that happened, that you're like, it really makes you question those decisions, right? That you had no choice in. And like, and who is Ellie? I mean, I asked myself, who is Ellie at that point so many times as I entered day 3, Seattle, all coming to a culmination. And just to kind of get things forward. So the next thing is that you get to what we would consider ending number 1, right?
Yeah.
Ending number 3. I don't know, which is
ending number 1, part 2,
which is where you finally have the showdown between Ellie and Abby, right? And this is in the
and you're playing as Abby.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where I just immediately I just charged Ellie and got killed because I was like, I know which horse I'm rooting for in this.
Did you know 100%? Did you know 100% that you were rooting for Ellie at that moment?
I think that there's some part of me that was committed to the revenge narrative one way or the other.
Yeah.
I still feel like Joel and Ellie, because of that experience in the first game, like they're still my team, regardless of how much I empathize with the other side.
Yeah.
See, I didn't. Yeah, I was an emotional wreck, but to Andy's point of the mirrored pregnancies, that really rung true at that point, right? Because you got to know those characters so well. You see Ellie kill them, you go there, and then it's like, well, as Andy said, Ellie's out of at that point you view her as kind of a monster.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And she's a boss.
I said it out loud. Ellie's a monster multiple times.
Yeah.
You're right on.
And it's
And-
a boss fight, and you're throwing down with her, and you don't feel bad about it. Yet in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't know who's going to come out alive. Like, even if I win this fight, I might be the one dying. Yes, Abby, I might be the one that ends up dying.
Mhm. Yeah. It was a
Brilliant.
tense moment.
It's just brilliant.
Yeah, and as someone, I generally really enjoy revenge stories, but whether you're playing a story or reading or whatever, like whether it's a revenge story that's about just the joy of like the righteous joy of getting vengeance, or if it's one of those where the message at the end is like, you got it, but at what cost? Either way, usually the person at the top of your kill list dies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
And-
eventually you get your white whale.
Yeah, and I thought it was such an interesting curveball at the end of that scene in the theater when they're finally doing their fight, that not only was it Abby who pretty decisively won, but that she didn't kill Ellie and just walked away. And what is it like? Don't let me ever see you again.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or something. And
That she had found compassion
yeah,
in
But-
all of that.
Yeah.
but still also on just I think on Naughty Dog's part, from the side of storytelling, the willingness to leave that unresolved. Like when that scene was ending,
You think?
Yeah.
I- yeah, but when that scene was ending and
Yeah.
I was surprised, I was still like, I'm on board with that. As someone who still loves revenge stories, like I kind of like the ambiguity that they left with that.
Ended with. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
but the thing that's funny about that is after that scene, you're in that house back in Jackson, in the farmhouse that Ellie and Deena had talked about.
Yeah.
All
And
settled down. Yeah.
Gorgeous
And-
scene.
it felt so much like the end of Uncharted 4.
It's
Where
a
you're
prologue.
walking
You thought it was a prologue. You thought it was just a thing you did that after the game was over.
Oh, epilogue. Yeah.
Epilogue.
Yeah, epilogue. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but throughout that whole sequence, I'm sort of bracing myself. Like I'm feeling like, okay, the I'm going to see credits in the next 10 seconds.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I felt that way for about 20 minutes or so. And
Yeah.
it was like, what are they doing here?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, what did you guys think when that was all going on?
I was with you.
Exact same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was like you even had the sun on the sunset. It's beautiful, just calming. Everything's
With JJ.
good.
Yeah.
On the tractor.
track.
Yeah,
Oh,
you have like
yeah.
a
Yeah.
beautiful moment, and everybody's good. They didn't get revenge, the true meaning of revenge, but they put their differences aside and moved on, right? And
Yeah.
and I was
And
okay
then it
with that.
shows. And then it shows PTSD. It shows the effects on her
Yeah.
when she has the
Yep.
breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, they're giving me a lesson of what this whole thing is. You're like, there's the lesson. This thing's over. And she walks back and you see that horse and you go, that's a bad sign.
Yep.
You walk in and it's Tommy and you're like, oh no. You're like, don't do it, Ellie. Do not do it, Ellie. And then Tommy puts that map on the goddamn table again and you go, do not leave that map, Tom. Do not leave. Like, throw that thing away. Throw that thing away. Throw that thing. I mean, I was like, throw that thing away. And off he goes. And at that point, I mean, we knew, right?
Yeah.
I knew. I was like, she's gonna.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
I kept
yeah.
saying no, but I knew
Yeah.
she was gonna do it. It was another one of those moments where, like, I didn't want to believe.
Yep.
But it was gonna happen.
And to that point, I want a happy ending for everyone because I'm an empathetic person with feelings. But like, it didn't work in that story. Like, if they would have put credits when you were staring out on Jackson, it's like that doesn't work with the story you're telling, for better or worse. Like, and I didn't want her to take, like you said, Andy. I was like, don't take it. You're happy. Look at JJ. Look at Deena. Everything's great. But then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, but she has to. Like, that's what this story is for her. Like this.
Well, she has to because she's a monster, by the way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
She should have not gone.
Yeah.
I could have seen an ending where she doesn't do that because, like, that would have been the happy ending. I would have been fine. I would have been fine with that credits. I mean, I'm glad they didn't, that they
Yeah.
went down the path they went, but credits there would have been fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think it would have been the game that at least when I finished, like this next part you go through it, I was like, Joe, I think said to me, goes, you finished? He goes like, what'd you think? He goes like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to influence your review. I'm like, it's getting a 10, Joe.
Yeah.
There is like,
Yeah.
I didn't go like, 9.75, maybe a 9.5. I don't know. I didn't like that one scene. They didn't need that extra scene, or this was
Yeah.
too long. I went 10. Like there
Yeah.
wasn't, there was just like, it's
same
10.
for me. Like it was
Yeah.
just flawless. Like I was just like, I mean, yes, it's not a perfect game, but
No.
in terms of the narrative and the journey they took me on, I couldn't ask for more. Like it took me places I didn't expect, and I adored it. And how it wrapped up too. Oh my God. Like
Yeah.
just the rage in that moment. Like it
So yeah.
Oh.
So after we think it's going to end, when in fact there's another 90 minutes or so left to play,
It might be like 3 hours at that point, by the way. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
it's a fair bit. We do get a quick scene with Abby again, Abby and Lev, where she gets sort of
They're
captured.
post life. What you think their
and then
idyllic post life is going to be.
yeah, by some other faction that's there in was it Santa Barbara? Is
Yep.
that where they are?
Yeah, Santa Barbara.
Do you remember the name of that faction offhand? I don't.
It was like the Rattlers or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
I was going to
bad
say some
guys.
snake related
Yeah.
thing. You know what that reminded me of was did you guys all finish Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Show? So one thing that I thought was really interesting about Breaking Bad, and I promise this will circle back to The Last of Us, is that in parts of that final season, for all of the great villains that show had along the way, ultimately in some of the final episodes, Walt just ends up like being pitted against just some like scumbag Nazi, like neo-Nazis that you don't really like know anything about or connect with. They're just like dishonorable dirtbags.
Yeah.
And that's what that final sort of infiltration sequence in The Last of Us reminded me of, was that for all of that they build up the WLF and the scars and the conflict between Abby and Ellie, like you're just sort of going up against just like pure
Dirtballs.
pure,
I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just pure malice and no empathy even attempted on that part. You're not supposed to understand or care about the Rattlers.
Well, they're horrible. They're basically infecting people to eat them, right? Did I read that right? Like
It was, yeah.
They're basically there to stand in your way of your objective, right? Like,
yeah.
and to put Abby in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it also highlights the humanity of the other factions along the way too, because suddenly you realize like, oh, these guys are just video game bad guys.
Yeah.
Like they've just got body armor and machine guns and like they are the sort of faceless enemy that I'm so used to fighting.
Definitely.
That's definitely part of the motion run. Like when she makes the call, they're like, "Yeah, we're the Fireflies. Oh, had no idea you guys were there. Oh, great. Yeah, let's do it." And if you're like, triumphant moment, and you're like, and you go outside the garage, and all of a sudden you're like, that wasn't what I thought was going to happen here, right? And that goes down, and you're like, okay, that scene's done. Now I'm back to Ellie, and well, oh my God, what is Ellie going to do? You know what I mean? Like, and there is no, at this point, she is pure rage.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just no way around it. Like this is like she knows she's risked everything. We all know, like, or at least I think I know, there's not going to be anybody there when she goes back. There's no farm to go back to.
Deena told.
There's no way. There's no way they go back and there's someone at that farm.
And she has no expectation of that either. I mean, she knows what it's costing her when she leaves.
Yeah.
And
there was a part of me though that when she left, I was like, when I talked about being okay with the ambiguity of that scene in the theater, there was some part of me that was like, I think I'm kind of glad that she's going back and actually gonna get revenge this time. Like she's actually gonna follow through with it.
And so
that's what I thought at the outset of that bit.
Yeah, that's what you thought.
Yeah.
So I think there's like you can you work your way in, and as you learn more about what's happened to Abby, there's still a little bit of moment of like, what have they gone through? Are they alive? Are they dead? And then you just basically come to that moment of pure rage amongst all those people who are being crucified on the pillars, which is incredibly like depressing. And I love what Joe said to me. He goes like, at first I thought I had this one fight with them where I had to dodge and punch them because it was going to lead me to the moment in the village with the fire city where I was going to fight this big guy to be ready for that boss. Thank God I'm done with that mechanic. And then no, wrong. It was all leading up to this moment, which was the final battle between Ellie and Abby. And I don't know about you guys. I did it again. I let myself die. I was like, I didn't know who I wanted to win.
See,
when she was, I did that when she was like starting to drown her underwater. I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, this is just so wrong. And it just felt off, and it was so gory and just visceral. And I didn't like how I felt in that moment at all, even though it was like, this is it. And then even knowing, like, if you complete that sequence, Naughty Dog might not give you the ending you anticipate, right?
No.
And that's exactly what they do here.
Yeah. I pulled punches, but I like that pressure of like, I don't want to see a loading screen. You know, like, I need to get through this pure. So like that's what propelled me to keep going. But in those moments when you like could actually like free swing, I was like, I tried to dodge and stuff and see if something would come from that. It just never did. But
no,
God.
and you hold her head underwater long enough. I was like, I do not feel good about the ending.
It's awful.
Which
this game.
They showed in the damn trailers, which is crazy.
Yeah. it's crazy. Yeah. And once again, they did. I checked trailers multiple times when I was going there. I was like, I cannot believe they did that.
Yeah.
And then even too, the thing that's I think most interesting about it too is that when she lets her up, right at that same moment too, I go, I don't know that I like this ending either. That it had gotten me to the point.
Yeah.
that I respected both their choices. I respected where they were coming from. I respected their perspective because the game is ultimately about perspectives, right? Yep. It is ultimately about perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was so mad at Ellie for being a monster I never knew she was, right? And I was so empathetic to Abby and what had happened to her in her life that they both were horrible and amazing at the same time, right? Yeah. Like that there's this weird dichotomy that had come to that it was just so hard to understand and say that this was it. But I will say this, I was relieved. I was like, okay, finally. That first ending when she said, I don't want everyone to see you again, let's go with that. Like, you actually go back, like, let's go back to that. Yeah. We went through all that. No, that's the right answer. Let's move on. Like, I don't want to see you again. Yeah. You don't want to see me again. Go away. Like,
and I totally did not see this coming though, because after that first ending in the theater where I don't ever want to see you again, then Ellie leaves to go track her down again. I'm like, oh, well, this time one of them is going to die. And for a second time to have them both walk away from that confrontation is like just totally blindsided me. But again, I think gives the story and the action like a level of not only surprise, but like a level of nuance that I like really appreciate. It makes you think about things in a different way when you have to acknowledge like this isn't just like a video game power fantasy where, you know, the good guy kills the bad guy.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and then the resolve at the end of that where she goes home.
Yeah.
And it's empty and she can't play her guitar anymore. You know, it's like
she's lost that part of her.
She's lost it. And you're just like, yeah, that's how it should have ended for her. You know, like perfectly. I thought that wrapped up perfectly.
And
she couldn't play guitar anymore, which by the way is something that Joel taught her. So she lost that connection to Joel that he had given her at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
That thing, her memory, the thing that would bring Joel back to her.
Yeah.
Gone.
Well, so Alex and I had different takes on this because that was my read of that scene was just like, it's sort of devastating that this quest for revenge not only cost her all these other things that you can enumerate, but also this like has cost her that connection and legacy with Joel. But Alex interpreted that scene a little differently.
Yeah, and I will say, given some time and rumination on her actions, I agree. But I think this
But yeah, what was your perspective on it?
And I still believe this too, because I think the moth is important. I think the moth is on the guitar for a reason, and in the loading screen when you first boot up the game, moths inherently, no matter how far they stray, are always attracted to the light. And I think that's emblematic of Ellie's character is she strayed. She went into the darkness for so long. But that moment of finally giving up that revenge and letting Abby live, even if she still is a monster, she still went back to the light a little bit. And my interpretation of that moment was, revenge costs you something, whether it's physically, emotionally, it always drains you. But putting that guitar down and walking away from it, I took it as much as this part of her life will always be with her, no matter what. And that's emblematic of the fingers. She's walking away from that idea of revenge. It's always going to be a part of her, but like that part of her life is over and she can at least try to move on, maybe go back to Jackson, who knows? But like, I think it was optimistically, as much as I think you guys are right, I think it's her moving on to try to salvage what's left of her life.
By the way, I think those both can be right.
Yeah.
I think
I agree.
I think that's just a more in-depth look at like what the guitar meant and like what her setting it down means.
Yeah.
I think I kind of want to wrap things up here. Maybe let's go around the horn. I want to talk about, like, if you were to give your sort of overall impressions of the game, like what stands out to you about The Last of Us 2 now that it's all sort of in the rearview mirror. Alex, you want to go first?
For sure. I think it did what great sequels do, in that it takes what the first iteration gave and improves on it in almost every single way, which even with Naughty Dog's pedigree, I wasn't expecting. I think the heightening of the violence and the more intense nature of the violence in this makes those beautiful moments even more pretty. And pretty is not the right word, but you know what I mean? Like, it brings them to a level that I really haven't seen in games. And on that level...
So you're saying the violence is sort of a strength for you in that way?
I mean, like... it's not that I sought it out, you know what I mean? I'm not like, yay, violence, but like, because this is so bleak and so dark, one moment we didn't talk about that really hit me was the record store in Seattle when Ellie plays for Deena, the museum, like we talked about, all those touching moments, and especially too, like Joel and Ellie's attempt at a reconciliation towards the end. Like those moments meant even more that like it means more to me in my mind that people can reach those levels of forgiveness and positive emotions even on the backdrop of just complete hell. And I think that's what makes those moments even more powerful. And to that point too, like, I think this game was scarier than the first one. I don't know about you guys, but like that ramped it up for me. Like, there was moments, since it's a spoiler cast, the moment when you're at the workbench in Seattle and the dude grabs you while you're working on that.
Oh yeah.
I about pooped my pants. Like, and the Rat King, my heart was in my throat the entire time in the bottom of the hospital.
That's not where it should be.
No, absolutely it should not. So, but I from story to animation to graphics, all of it, I think it took what Last of Us 1 did and improved upon almost every aspect of it. And I have not had an emotional journey like that in quite some time. So, and I think it's a once in a generation title.
Yeah.
I had that same thing a little bit too. Like when you're in the skyscraper and you're starting to work your way down, like that whole scene is so great in that kind of burnt out thing when you're going through all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember doing like 1 or 2 floors, then looking over and looking at the wall, and it said 19th floor, and I'm like, I have to do 19 more floors of this.
Yeah.
I can't do 19 more floors of this.
Yeah.
Like I gotta fall through at some point because I just can't. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is.
Yeah. So I mean, Andy, okay, so we have your review on the site. That's your general takeaway. I mean, but if you had to condense it down, like what's your big takeaway from the game?
I think the game is it's just terribly fascinating and very powerful to me in a lot of ways. Number one of the things that sticks out to me is that we all talk about the violence in this game, but yet, like when I play Assassin's Creed, I kill 4x people, 5x people. I mean, I mow down entire castles and I don't think twice about any of the people I kill. And by the way, in other games, I mow down people like, in Doom, I killed so many things. Yes, they were demons, but you know what I mean? Like it happens. It's almost like I just go through it like as a motion, in games, right? And this is one of the games that the reason it's powerful is the fact that it made a game about violence spent the whole time going like, you really want to do that? You really want to do that? And I think it made some people really angry, but I felt it really elevated the conversation about violence in games to a degree because it is so at your like in your face about it. And and then later on in the game, as I played it, I really got upset about agency, which, you know, agency is really important to games, but it's also in this particular game, I feel it's important that you don't have that choice, that you're not given the choice, that's how it leads to that ending, that if all the emotions line up, that when you have Abby in the water and you're holding her as Ellie, that without if I had agency, I would have never done the things that Ellie did. I would have never done the things that Abby did. And that very, very poignant moment where I'm like, God damn it, I'm gonna kill her. I don't want to kill her. Like that they want me there. They want me in their grasp of that. They want me to think Ellie is a monster. And if I was given the choice, I would have not made Ellie a monster. I would have gone down a different path. And so I think that's incredibly fascinating. And I think that's incredibly that shows in so many ways how powerful games are to me. Even though I agree at times the violence was exhausting.
Yeah.
Like there were times that I just like, I can't kill it. I don't want to sneak up and kill anymore. You guys did this too long. But I think they wanted you exhausted. Like I literally think they were like, yeah, that's too many. But I want you to feel that way. I want you to be emotionally drained when you get to these parts in the game. And I think it's effective at that. And I think some people will look at it as being repetitive, but I look at it as like they manipulate it. I mean, the game is very manipulative the whole way through as far as like getting you to those points. But I think that's what makes it interesting. You know, one of my favorite movies is There Will Be Blood. And that's like not a feel good, happy summer movie, right? You know what I mean?
No.
Like it is very dark. But I think this game for me feels like that, in that it has these moments that are about reflection, that are about the experience, that are about seeing the world through someone else's eyes, through seeing it through that perspective. And for me, that's why the game was so powerful. That's why the game really, really hit hard. And that's why I felt for Ellie. That's why I felt for Abby. That's why like when I went back, like I remember going back to the hospital and being like, oh man, I killed all these people. Like I came through here and I killed them all. And they're all like, I'd hang out with these people, right? These are cool people. Like I don't know that I hate them. And making me go through that, while some people say it's really obvious, like murder bad. Andy, do you need a game to tell you murder bad? I'm like, no, but I thought it was just a fascinating roller coaster experience emotionally and as a player. And it's unbelievable. And then I think on top of that, I had to point out the actors in this game did such a good job. They were so powerful. And I mean, so many of them, right? And so many of them did such great performances. And, you know, Naughty Dog to me is really a master of that kind of conversation as you move through the world that makes the world feel more real. And once again, goes back to that. That's why this particular murder simulator hits harder than others, right? It's all a culmination of all these tools that they have mastered and they apply to this game. And so I think it's one of those things that like them and like Red Dead Redemption 2, I look at these two games as like, if you wanted to do narrative in games, these are, if I was a professor, these are the two games that like, these are where we're starting. We're going to spend this entire year discussing and breaking down what happens in these games, not because you need to replicate them, but because I think it shows they're great examples of how games can show the player different perspectives and understanding who people are and what you can hide, right? And then what you can show and how that can have effect on you as a player. And I think that's its real magic. And I just it's an amazing piece of software.
Yeah. And I think that's not to say that there isn't a wider conversation that can happen about The Last of Us and the industry in general, like the tendency to view all action like down the barrel of a gun, like through the lens of violence. I think that's totally a valid discussion. But on some level too, I guess I wonder, not that you can't talk about it with The Last of Us, but it feels to me almost more appropriate to put more of the games that treat it more casually or kind
Agreed.
of
Yeah.
trivialize it rather than the ones that sort of, use it to such a distinct purpose the way
Yeah,
The Last of Us does.
I think it gives it weight. And I think to some degree the next game I played where I was killing, citizens in this world, it felt weird to me that they seemed so lifeless, right? To some degree. And I think, by the way, I think this opens up the door for, could you make a game that's more powerful where like maybe there is no violence throughout the whole thing, but there's only those like 5 points of like real violence that feel more powerful because of that, right? Like I think there's some interesting discussion around it, and the way it's affected things. I mean, I think people got really stuck on, like in my review, I said, this part wasn't fun, and they were like, oh, this game's not fun. You hate this game, and it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's you're road weary, right? Like that the controls work, right? Everything in the stealth in the game, all that stuff is really, really well executed.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there were times, I had a couple things where I could filter people to one door and like assassinate them over and over again. It has its little flaws. Don't get me wrong. But when I wanted to make it feel alive, I could move around the world and make it feel alive, as far as the combat goes. But it's interesting that it just wore on you. Like that even though this mechanic was fun, even though it was well done, well executed, and in another game, I would have never put that perspective on it. But in this game, I did. And even it sounds to me like that's what's interesting, is that the haters who are like, I hate this game, I hate it. The reason they hate it is because it put weight on that, right? So I think we both see the same thing from it either way. So once again, that's what makes it so fascinating. And I like I said before earlier in the show, I literally was like, kill Ellie. She's a monster. Just kill her. Just get it done, because I at that point I couldn't choose between the two. You know what I mean? Like, obviously I have a longer relationship with Ellie. I like Ellie more versus Abby, I think, in that regard, because I've known her longer, a longer relationship with her through these games. But it was hard. Like they had both gotten to be such monsters that you were kind of like, kill them both. Like, is the world better with them both gone? Right? Like, can one of these pillars fall on them both and end it that way? Is that better? I don't know what the answer is. But that's what's interesting to me, is that it all culminates when it all comes together near the end. When you start down that path in Santa Barbara, where I don't know what you did, I went, really? Like really? I gotta really, right? Like, this is where we're gonna go.
Yeah.
That plays into like how they did that. And I still think too, I think about it, Naughty Dog, like they went to Sony like, okay, we thought the game was done here. We want to add another 3 hours because we think this is like, this takes it to another level. And like that all went through. I think that takes a lot of dedication to their craft. Maybe they had it designed from the beginning, but it's impressive. In what it does. So hats off, Naughty Dog. You guys really nailed it.
Yeah. Well, and Andy, you mentioned the hospital and all the details and the people there, and that sort of ties into my overall takeaway, which is a quick one, because I agree with the stuff that you and Alex have said about it so far. But I think apart from all of the like narrative power that the game has, I think what surprised me the most consistently and impressed me the most consistently was just the attention to small details in the game. And like you say, part of that comes from just fantastic like motion capture, animation, voice performances, all that kind of stuff. But I think the hospital is a place that has just a couple little like details planted in there that really impressed me as I looked back on it more. The stuff like so like when you play as Abby, when you first start in the stadium, there's this dog there that you can play fetch with, and this old dog named Bear. And then,
which it's always fun. Like it passed the you can pet the dog test, like all those things, right? Yeah.
Yep. But then when you continue playing as Abby and you eventually go to the hospital, she meets a dog there and is like, "Oh, it's you, Bear. Like, I didn't know they had you stationed here. The same dog you were playing fetch with earlier that you, as Ellie, probably killed when you infiltrated the hospital already in a prior sequence, right?
And we all know
So-
killing dogs makes us all angry.
Yeah, it just pulls on the heartstrings in a little bit of a different way, I think. Didn't we talk about this on the podcast at some point recently? The difference between like killing
think
people
so.
and killing animals,
Yeah.
and how. Anyway, so little things like that, but then also conversations that the main characters are having that at the time just feel like a different mystery that's going on, but you sort of overlook it because maybe they're talking about Ellie or who knows what, but they basically reference Abby escaping, and then they talk to, like, I think it's Nora. Yeah. Someone mentions to Nora, like, hey, I'm gonna tell Isaac what I think really happened here, implying like I think you let Abby escape, which of course you keep playing, and yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But just the way that they sort of uh give you details, because like they don't, it's not like they go back and make you replay that scene. That doesn't come back and click necessarily. It did for me because I was writing a preview on that specific section of the game, so like I noticed it going back to it. But I think that commitment to just the little story details and the way they string players along, and establish such a firm foundation for where things are going, just really impressed me.
Yeah, the loops within loops. Like when you replay it, I already started a new game plus, and like there's things already, you hear them talking and you're like, different light, right? Like once you know.
Yeah. Okay, so Reiner, what about you?
Well, I echo a lot of things Andy said, and Alex and you, Joe. So I'll keep this short. But this is our second time into this really dark and dangerous world, yet it feels new again, right? Like they embed this thought of expect the unexpected at all turns. And immediately, like within a couple hours, you're just like, I don't know where this is going to go. You thought you went into this game thinking Joel or Ellie's going to die at the end, right? Like that's what's the first thing in your mind is like, I hope they both turn out okay. And then they upend that right away. And it's a game about flipping over tables, right? Like you'll flip over a table and be like, I don't know why I did that, but I did. And then 6 hours later, you're like, oh no, that table. Did I flip that? I flipped that table over. And like they get you that way where you are going through a moment and you're embedded in that moment and you have those feelings that that you're doing the right thing at that time. And then down the road, you realize, oh, I made a terrible mistake, or that character I really loved, I don't think I love her anymore, or the one that I wanted to protect, I don't know if I should be protecting her. Like, it's a game about monsters and feelings being turned on you, and I loved it. I thought it was one of the generation's best games, one of the best narrative sequels ever in gaming. There's nothing quite like it, right? Like just how they turn things on you.
Yeah,
But in that breath, keep you engaged. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it would have been interesting if they would have, to your point, like made that comfort food game. Like if they would have done like the first half and had it finish how if there would have been people who liked it more if it just would have done that.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, people latch onto these characters. They have statues of them and toys of them in their house, and then now you look at it, and it like a memorial, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're gone. Or
I wonder?
your thoughts of who they were are different.
Yeah.
So you guys remember after the first game, there were some people who took it for granted that there would be a sequel. And there were a lot of us, and I was in this camp, that didn't think there should be a sequel to the original Last of Us. I think that, to Reiner's point, I think that they flipped enough tables to make it feel fresh and not iterative, even though so many of the themes are sort of mirrored in there.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be a Last of Us Part 3?
You're reading my mind. I was thinking about that as we were talking about it.
I thought about it when I played it. I was like, will they do one with Abby and Lev? Right? Would they make a third game? Would Ellie head out on her own? I kind of feel like they would do an Ellie game if they did it. But I kind of feel like we not have any more rage in poor Ellie's life? Like
Yeah.
let her move on. Like I there's something there that I feel uncomfortable with both those choices, and maybe that's what Naughty Dog wants me to feel about both those choices. I do like their world, right?
Yeah.
I do like a lot of things about the world. I would be interested in other stories. I think that's always my thing with Naughty Dog. I would love for them to maybe go back to that world, but tell a different story,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like a different perspective, find a different group of people to put against that backdrop would be the most interesting to me. Um,
Or
I
zoom
also-
forward, let players control JJ in like 20 years or something like
yeah,
that.
that would be something you could do. Yeah, for sure. Or you know, or you could go back and like try to like do some other things about like maybe the story of Tommy.
Yeah.
You know, and Joel, like from before. You could do like an interesting prequel that
Yeah.
could be interesting.
Mhm.
I don't know, you know, because I think there is something like I think that's one of the things we talked about here. Like we always looked at Joel from the first game, like he's a good guy, right? And I think it became clear in this game that like there was some dark stuff going on before that happened, right? He's not as clear a picture as you assumed him to be.
Yeah.
So you could explore that. I also like, I mean, Naughty Dogs they're such good storytellers. I'd love to see them do something completely different too. But
Yes.
I mean, if they announced a Last of Us Part 3 or a Last of Us, you know, a different tale, I would. I mean, I'd buy it and play it 100%.
Or even more Uncharted. I don't care what they make.
Yeah.
Just keep making big AAA single player games, and I'm in.
Yeah. To Andy's point about telling different stories, I'm in that same camp because they proved that in this game that you could take Abby, a character we have no connection to whatsoever, and tell an interesting story in this world. So I like that idea, but honestly, I hope, as much as we talked about the symbolism of Ellie leaving the guitar, I hope there's another layer to that where that was Naughty Dog saying, this is us leaving the story behind. I would love to see them be done with this and use those storytelling skills in a new world that they can bring out these new characters and stuff. So would I bristle a little bit, but like at the same time, I was in that camp you talked about, Joe. I wanted Last of Us to be one and done. And they proved that it still had stories to tell. So if Druckmann and his awesome team have stories to tell with this, if there's another arc to this, I'll get over it. I'll play it and I'll be just fine.
I would also accept if they were like, oh, and there's time travel. Here's a mech from the future that's been delivered to Ellie, and she's now gonna like tear things apart. I'd be like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
fine with that too. Like, yeah, like, you know,
It's like an RTS.
That's in keeping with the themes of The Last of Us. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think no matter where it goes, whether it's mechs in the future or not, I think that The Last of Us Part 2 is definitely just an amazing experience by itself when taken in, as a continuation of that first game too. And I'm excited to see what, if anything, happens going forward. I'm fine either way. So, all right. Well, I think we covered a lot of bases here.
Oh yeah.
We did a pretty thorough discussion.
Leave comments.
They
will. They'll leave comments.
We'll leave them open on this story. We haven't been leaving them open on a lot of Last of Us stories because of spoiler concerns. We're trying to keep a lot of content spoiler free. But this one is not spoiler free.
Not at all.
Chime in, let us know what you think, and I'm sure that we'll have a lot more discussions about The Last of Us Part 2 in the months to come.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.